The Netsuke we're considering now is an ivory carp. The carp is quite a popular subject of Japanese art in general. The example we have here is perfect Netsuke in the sense that instead of being shown in its full length, it's beautifully curved around with its tail joining back up to the body, which means that it makes a compact form, which is highly considered as the ideal for a good Netsuke. The point being that you don't wish to have anything sticking out which might be broken off while being worn. It's carved from elephant ivory. It has beautiful large inlays of dark buffalo horn for the eyes, which is quite a typical feature of Netsuke of this period. The period is late 18th century, probably before 1800. The scales of the fish are carved in considerable detail, and each scale is incised with little markings, and all the incisions are then heightened in black ink, which again is quite typical of ivory Netsuke of this period. The tail is pierced with two holes for the so-called himatoshi, the cord attachments, and it's widely thought that in the case of this Netsuke these holes were added later. I think that's quite probable. Quite often in 18th century Netsuke we have what are called natural himatoshi. In other words, the object itself has some sort of hole in it which allows for the attachment of a cord, because of course the Netsuke is attached to a hanging object, so-called sagemono, an inrow containing medicines or pouch of some sort for tobacco or other bits and pieces, or indeed a money pouch. But I think in this case it's quite likely that the cord was simply attached around the form of around the body of the carp itself. This would have functioned very much as an early Netsuke, the word early Netsuke in the form of rings, so-called kuruma Netsuke, and I think this would have functioned in exactly the same way. There has been speculation that this carp might be by one of the greatest carvers of all, Masanao of Kyoto, who was active in the period that this Netsuke was certainly carved. He's one of the artists mentioned in the Soken Kisho, this notable publication of 1781, which is the only real record of Netsuke carvers over a period of about 200 years in Japan, and it falls right in the middle of the Netsuke carving period between 1700 and 1900. But I have looked at the known models by Masanao, some signed, some not signed, and it seems to me that they have a different sort of mouth. It's a very elongated mouth with or face with a large open mouth. The other feature which I think differs greatly from this Netsuke is the way in which the dorsal fin on the back and the tail are carved. In the case of Masanao, he gives a lovely thinness to both the fin and the tail. They're carved, the ivory is carved very thin, and he also gives a beautiful undulation, a sort of frilliness to the whole length of the fin and to the tail, which actually is quite fan-shaped. In the present Netsuke in the Hermitage, we have a fin which is, I would say, a little bit thicker than Masanao's. It's undulating, but it doesn't have the nice thin frilliness along the top ridge. And certainly when we come to the tail, instead of this fan-frilled, furling fan shape, we have a rather sort of salamander-like tail. It's like the end of an oar. It's quite rounded, and it has no real movement to it. It is just a sort of flat piece of tail. So for those reasons I think it's not by Masanao. It's still by a very good carver. I think the other suggestion is that it could be by somebody from the Yoshitomo school of carvers, also working in Kyoto at exactly the same time as Masanao, so in the late 18th century. One of the reasons for thinking that is that there are models of the legend of Kinko, a Chinese literatus who went underwater on the back of a large carp, and there are models of this by Yoshitomo, well-known models. They're great carvings, and again you have such features as the very big inlay for the eyes. And artists of that Yoshinaga Yoshitomo school do have a tendency to have incised decoration. For example, in their figure carvings, you find repeat patterns along the edges of garments, of kimono or robes, whatever. And I think you find those a similarity in the way that the gills of this fish are carved. So I think there's good reason for making that attribution.